What's up everyone, and welcome to the Kontakt Script Programmer. Today we're going to look at 2.12, so the UI control. So this is a callback that is used every time the user changes whatever UI element it's tagged onto. So this is going to go pretty closely with 2.13, which is the UI update, although I will do a separate one for that just because it's going to talk about different threads and how you can keep your sample or your instrument running effectively. So UI control, really easy to use, and we're actually going to go through and build all of these just to show you how they all work. They're all really similar. So on initialization, we declare all of our UI elements just so it only happens once. We create all the UI elements and then we don't have to do anything else to them. So we declare a UI underscore knob called knob, and it has a value of 0 to 100 going up one step at a time. We declare a UI button called button, a UI switch called switch, a UI table. The important one to remember, table has the percentage sign instead of the dollar sign. It's a table with 10 elements, 10 columns. 10 elements is probably the better way to think of them. They are 2 wide, 2 high, and 100 possible values, or 100 possible, so from 0 to 100. And you can set that to whatever you like, obviously, for different resolution, I suppose. You declare a UI menu called menu, and then we add a couple of menu items with just this command, add menu item, menu, entry 1, and we put it in the first slot, which is 0, and add menu item, entry 2, second slot, which is 1. From there, we declare a UI value editor from 0 to 127, one step at a time, and a UI slider, which we will use a lot of, called slider, and it goes from 0 to 100. And then we end the initialization phase. From there, we just play with each of the instances and how to initialize them. I'm not going to do this engine uptime thing. Basically so this is just saying it's going to print a message whenever we touch this UI control, saying menu, and then adding in a bracket and adding in the engine uptime, so how long Kontakt has been open for, and then closing it. It's really not that interesting unless you want to do it this way, but because we're going to be writing out the same thing a lot of different times, I'm just going to keep it simple. So let's jump into logic and see how we go. Booting up a new instrument, we're going to initialize, and we declare a UI knob called knob, going from 0 to 100. So it's handy to think of every time you initialize something, what values they might be tied to. So for instance, when I'm thinking of this table, I'm remembering the percentage sign, and then we're remembering 10 elements, and it's 2 wide, 2 high, and 100 possible values. You should be able to use that for quite a number of different things. Like for instance, a lot of those Kontakt instruments where they draw their own waveform are done in tables, where you can draw your own waveform and then it reads it as separate elements and pumps out the information from there. So actually pretty simple. You don't really see that many of those instruments around anymore just because Native Instruments have upped their game quite a bit, but still pretty interesting when you think about it in that way. This value editor as well, you're going to be really interested to see what that looks like. At least I hope you are. Frankly, I'm on the edge of my seat. So 0 to 100 on my slider and on. Now if I apply, it's going to throw open each of these different shapes, and I can draw into the table. As I said, obviously we can see that goes from 0 to 100. Okay, if I change this from 0 to 10, for instance, it would be the same same kind of thing. Obviously it only goes up to 10, and you can see what you're changing, which is handy. Buttons are either on or off. Switches are likewise. The volume slider, you already see one of those up here, and this volume slider, well, pan, pot, slightly different, but again, just a different type of slider. So we'll play with those soon. The entry table, so this is just a menu with different entries, which again, we would call separate functions based on what we're going to use this entry for. The knob works just the way same way as you would expect it to work. And a value editor, the cool thing about value editors is you can type into them. Okay, so that's another handy element that you will want to use. You can't type into knobs, not without changing the scripting quite a bit. Matter of fact, you can't type into any of these without changing them, except the value editor. There are no bounds on the value editor, so obviously something we would want to do is probably put bounds on that so that it was locked in, and you're not going to get someone breaking your software by doing some insane delay time and then complaining that your software doesn't work. So from there, we're going to build each of the implementations. They're very boring, but just to show that they work, we're just going to send a message saying knob and an on, and it's that simple. Okay, so you'll see that I don't have any messages, okay, until I touch the knob, and then it just says knob. Okay, that's not what it's calling me, that's just what I've programmed it to call. Sorry, I had to say that. My lawyers paid me. So the next one we're going to call button. I know, outrageous stuff. Okay, so now when we touch the knob, we get the knob. When we touch the button, we get button. And you can see how this is working. Again, they're all really simple on UI controls, and it's really handy to do these a few times so that you realize how to do them. The faster you can get them in your head, the faster you can move on with your life. Okay, so on UI control, especially if you can spell. Oh man, I'm giving this one a red hot go. I really am. Switch. Okay, message. Switch. Let's build another one. So the table, remembering the table is slightly different. Sorry, on UI control, remember the percentage sign for table. That one's going to be called table. Remember all your brackets and ending on each of them. We could change this to literally anything. It could play a note if we hit a button, or it could trigger an arpeggiator, or it could turn up some distortion, or change some delays, or turn up the volume. You know, once we get past the callback stage of the manual, we're going to play with a lot more of this stuff. But again, it's really, really important to have a think about how this is all implemented. So we're just going to do it all because it only takes a couple of seconds, and then it will be done. So we're getting to the end of these now. V-edit, value editor, and value edit, editor. Again, almost always forget that. And last up is our slider on UI control. So you can see how much longer it would have taken if I wanted to do this complicated sequence of brackets and engine stuff. So we won't do that for now. Alright, and message, I would have stuffed that up, so make sure you do your $signs, unless they are not $signs. Always get paid. So end on, there we go. Let's see if we got them all right. Oh, we didn't. Look at that, bracket the wrong way. What a scrub. There we go. Okay, so now if we play with the table, we'll see we get table. If we hit the button, we get button. If we change the slider, we get the slider. If we hit the switch, we get switch. If we change the entry, we get the menu. Notice we don't get it until we change value editor and the knob. Okay, so makes some pretty basic sense, but it's a handy way to populate your instrument. It already looks a lot cooler to have an instrument with a little bit of functionality as opposed to these ones where they've just got one background image and they call it a day. Kontakt can do a lot of different stuff, as you're probably seeing from the table. For instance, this could be everything from a drum sequencer with different, or a step sequencer rather, with different steps. Your buttons can be on or off. They can be different values. They could cause different chains. They could be different chords. They could be really anything. So have a think about maybe a couple of different ways to use each of these, and I will see you next time.